chat box, you'll see a phone number that if you want to dial in to the audio portion of the call, that would be great, because we're going to leave everyone's line open so that we can actually talk with each other. This is a nice informal webinar with just, 10 or 15 people involved, so it'll be easy for us to do that. So if you have the ability to call in, you'll see that information in the chat box. And you'll also see it if you look at the top of the page under event info, it will give you the call-in number as well. And that will give you the ability to, participate in the conversation. If you're not able to call in and you have questions or comments that you want to make during the course of our discussion this morning, you can chat those questions into the chat box. And the way you do that is if you look at the top of your screen over to the right, you'll see a little, speech bubble that says chat under it. When you click on that, a box will open down below, and you'll see a couple of messages in there, and also you can, chat to the group. What you want to do is in the Send To box, that's the drop-down box, you want to chat to all participants so everyone can see your comments and questions. You just type those into the box and click send, and then, we'll see that now. And if anybody feels like testing it, feel free to go ahead and do that. I hope everyone has a cup of coffee, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation this morning. I thank Tam and Nikki, the parent advisors from the Western region, for getting this set up. And to those of you who don't know me, I'm Ann Kuppinger. I work with CTAC. And I'm working on a number of initiatives with CTAC, but one area of focus for me is on helping all of you make this transition to managed care and to continue to really strengthen the wonderful work that you're doing. So I'm excited to be here, and I really encourage everybody to be active participants in this phone call. And this is sort of our beginning conversation, and I'll be coming along with Yvette to meet with you in person in early November. And so I'll let Yvette introduce herself as well.
Yes, thank you, Ann. Hello, everyone. As Ann mentioned, my name is Yvette Kelly, and I am one of the individuals who also work at CTAC and working on this specific initiative around managed care readiness and getting providers ready, as well as working with residential providers. And so we're excited to be talking with you guys today around that process and some of the things that CTAC is able to offer, some of the resources. So one of the things that we wanted to show you is that it takes a lot to make the world go round in a world of preparing for managed care and getting everyone up to snuff. And so due to that, CTAC has a host of partners along with MCTAC. And I should mention that CTAC and MCTAC are really the same entity. Everyone from MCTAC works with folks from CTAC. We're in the same office, but MCTAC specifically focuses on managed care readiness, where CTAC does more of some of the clinical initiatives. But I wanted to let you know that there's a lot of partners who we've enlisted to kind of help us prepare providers for what's in store. And so as you can see, we're working with Families Together, Ideas, and there's a lot of other folks who help us in terms of helping providers get ready and get the content that's needed. We also ask that if you have not already done so, to sign up for our listserv. And you can do that by just going to the ctacnurc.com or the mctac.org and signing up on the listserv. And that way you'll be able to see what all of the offerings are and be able to get emails regarding those, so you know what we're offering. Also wanted to take a moment just to really kind of orient you to our CTAC webpage. I should mention that we are in the process of revamping this, so it may look like this today, not necessarily like this tomorrow, but the thought is still the same around some of the content offerings that are there in terms of being able to go to this page as a resource for past webinars, for upcoming things that are on the agenda. As you can see to the left, there's a lot of training and resources. You can click on either one of those categories of clinical trainings, business trainings, or other trainings, and kind of see what we've offered. And oftentimes there's a recording there that you can view later if you unfortunately did not have time to see that or missed a particular webinar. Along with that, we also have our Managed Care Technical Assistance Center webpage. Again, it gives you the timeline for all the behavioral health managed care, and there is so much going on around this transition that I think it would be really helpful to be in tune to this. These things, all of the offerings, right now they're really focused on the adult side, but I want to say that there are some offerings that are relevant for broad audiences, so it'd be helpful if folks would sign up and be aware of what's upcoming, because I think that you'll find this to be a great resource. Again, here's this tools and resources page at MCTAC, very similar to CTAC, where they put a lot of things on here that are applicable to a lot of broad audiences. I also want to take a minute to talk with you about our managed care readiness assessment. I'm not sure if folks have seen this. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. But what CTAC and MCTAC did was really put out a readiness assessment for providers to go ahead and take the assessment to really determine where you are in preparation for managed care. And so what we are asking providers to do, if they haven't already done so, is really to get together with a team and really complete the readiness assessment. I think that you'll find that it will kind of highlight areas of focus, and that way, as you're transitioning and preparing for managed care, you'll really know what areas to focus on. But the first thing to do is you can't do this by yourself. It really takes a number of people in the organization to get together to really look at this. So we encourage everyone to create a team and to complete this with the team, to then review your profile with your team and look and see what are those areas that you may need to improve upon, or look in those areas that you're doing well so you know you don't need to attend to that right now. But it will be really helpful to really know where you stand in the process. You want to team up with others in your community who are involved in the same process, and maybe can share some, shed some light, or, you know, maybe you could partner with someone really trying to, you know, work on an area of interest to both of you. And then you want to use this as a basis for a work plan for your team. Again, it really is a helpful tool to kind of help you assess where you are organizationally in preparation for managed care, and then really take a look at that and, if necessary, develop a plan to move forward. Here are some of the assessments related to the managed care readiness. So it's understanding MCO priorities, which is a big thing. And as we transition, there's a lot of uncertainty about that. There's contracting and there's IT. So there's a lot of things that the managed care readiness assessment speaks to. Again, we just want to encourage you to go ahead and take a look at that. And so we also wanted to highlight some of the things that we know that family peer support providers are really good at and what they know. There's a lot of transition going on. I know there's a lot of uncertainty about what's expected. You know, what can we expect in the future? How is this going to work? And so I think it would be helpful just to understand kind of where you are in the frame of some of the things that you already know, some of the strengths of the program, and you really can use this to leverage how you move forward. So some of the things that we know is we know that family peer support is one of the 6 new state plan services that are going to be offered when the waiver is approved. We know that managed care organizations highly value peer services. So this is very important because they find peer services to be a way to augment treatment with families, and really find that folks who are connected to peer services have better outcomes. So that's very important. We know that there is a new focus on value and outcomes, and so we're moving from mainly just kind of a number, kind of, you know, how many services, how many clients do you serve, to really a focus on quality and outcomes. All right, and so I think that's going to be kind of maybe one of the hardest shifts. And so you're going to have to think about, you know, how our program is going to really going to look at outcomes. What tools are you going to be using? And so, but we know that that's a new focus. We know that your programs have a lot of experience partnering, that this is kind of one of the cornerstones of what you do. Diversification and flexibility are going to be utmost important in this process. And I think more importantly also to understand that there will be a credentialing process and it will be required in order to bill Medicaid. So I know that there's the movement to get people credentialed. So if these are things that you want to be looking at when you're talking about workforce and really thinking about, you go back to your readiness assessment, thinking about what are some of the things that need to happen for you to be in the best position possible when we move over to managed care. You will also need to, if you haven't already, adapt and develop an infrastructure. Again, the readiness assessment will help you kind of hone into those areas that need some focus. And we know that although it is a ways off, we know that, you know, time moves quickly, and so it's really now in focus.
Yvette?
Yes.
Yvette, this is Pam
Yes.
Brannon.
Hello, Pam.
How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Could you, because we do have some new programs who are venturing out on their own, and I just want to make sure that they understand some of the language that is being used. So could you explain what the state plan is? So at our last meeting, Heather spoke about being in the state plan, and I just want to make sure that everybody understands what that is.
Sure. So the state plan services are services that the state is proposing that are going to be included in the Medicaid package to really broaden the scope of services for children and families. So these services will be available to the Medicaid population for the children's world, and there are services on the adult side, but some of those services are intended to address kind of service gaps and offer more flexibility and services for children and family that meets their needs. And so there's a waiver that has to go in for those services to be approved, and I know that they are working on that. And so once that approves, it opens up a door of 6 new services. And I don't have the other.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ann.
The other thing I would add, to that is that the implications of being a state plan service at a very broad level is that you will be, the Family Peer Support Services will be available to any child who is eligible to receive Medicaid, either by virtue of their family's income or if they're deemed eligible because of their, the degree of functional impairment or disability that they have. And there will be some criteria to receive the service, but the hope is that it will be at that level fairly open so that you should be able to get involved with families at a more preventive level and stay involved with them if necessary, if they move to kind of higher levels of care, for example, if they're involved in a health home. So what's good about that is that there are some services in the that will only be available to kids who have a higher level of need, but this service should be available more broadly.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions at this point before Yvette moves forward?
No.
Okay.
All right.
The other thing I would add is that when you probably only a couple of you have completed that readiness assessment. So I would really encourage you to make one of your first follow-up activities after this call and before we meet in November is to take a look at that readiness assessment. And I am willing to that your first reaction may be to run away. Because it lists a lot of things that sound like they're in a foreign language, competencies that you have to have, and you know, skills that you might need. But that I would like to first say that that is the reaction of many providers. So you are not alone in that feeling, and that many providers, especially small providers that haven't historically billed Medicaid before, you know, there's a steep learning curve, but that CPAC and the CAC will be doing a lot of work with providers, you know, in the winter and spring to help make some of that terminology and the procedures clear to you, but that it does require a certain amount of just starting down that path and being comfortable with the fact that you don't really understand all of it, but engaging in the process, and that knowledge and that understanding will accumulate as you go along. So it's really important to take a look at that, but don't be intimidated by the fact that there may be a lot of things on there that you aren't ready for, and that you don't even understand what the question is at this point.
Yeah, that's a good point. So moving forward, kind of as Ann described, it really looks like there's a lot more on, you know, the side that's kind of uncertain and things that we know versus the side that we know. But we also, again, want to focus on the things that you do well. And just to point back to the readiness assessment, it's also to help you find out where your strengths are and be able, and again, be able to leverage those. So we know that you're good at reaching out and connecting with families that feel tremendous stigma, and that is very, very important. You know how to help providers engage with families, and this is something that really should not be understated. That is a huge, huge advantage in the world of managed care, being able to connect with families, being able to engage families, very difficult families, being able to help families come to the table with providers. That is so, so important. And so you guys do that. You're able to do that. How to bridge, how to be a bridge for families as they make life and service transitions, and really helping the families kind of state what their needs are and how things are going, important. And how to make sure that families have a voice, that their plan of care is guided by their vision, and it's more likely to be successful, and they're more likely to be satisfied by the service. So really understanding that those things are really valued in this process. And as Ann mentioned before, more of how to connect families to help earlier. You know, so how do we find families, get families, and connect them to services that are more on the preventative side versus, you know, on the tail end when they're, you know, ready for residential or they're ready for higher level of services. And so that should not be understated. It is a tremendous asset to be able to do that. How to support families is build hope and stay in the game. Again, many practical strategies that make a big difference. So sometimes, you know, I'm a former clinician, I should mention that. But one of the things I think that you're able to bring to the table is really to help, you know, their other service providers understand what works for this family or what may or may not work, and help the family navigate those systems. We also know what helps to reduce stress and increase wellness, how to connect them to some of their natural supports, and how to really have them out in the community in a very successful way. And at this time, I'm going to pass it on to Ann.
Anybody remember this cartoon? This will date you as elderly like me. I remembered it and I went looking for it. I'm grateful to find it online. So the couple slides that Yvette just did, I think, are really important because you, I think, may underestimate the value that you hold as family care support services providers in a managed care environment. And that doesn't mean that this path of making that transition is going to be easy, but it does mean that it's really important for you to think about how you communicate what you're good at and what you're able to accomplish when you work with families in a way that's going to be marketable and understandable to both managed care organizations and also to a much broader group of providers than historically you've interacted with before. So instead of being just a standalone service where you do really good work with families when they come to you, part of the new way of thinking is how do you insinuate yourself and kind of get in the middle of everything else that's going on in the system and do what you do in a way that kind of greases the wheels of the system. That's one of the things that managed care is really going to value. And how do you help the communication work better between providers and families, between providers and other providers, in a way that improves everybody's access to services and satisfaction with their experience? Because managed care organizations are very focused on, you know, how people experience care. And I think you have a lot of perspective on that, and you also have the ability to help families articulate any kind of things that they think are going well or things that aren't going well so that people can really help the system, you know, improve and be more responsive to families. So I included this slide only because I think that all of us are still in a place where, you know, it feels like maybe some really clear information will come out tomorrow, and then I can start working on this transition. And it's not like that. It's really, you know, we have some time frames, and those time frames are right now, in January of 2017, we will formally make this transition into Medicaid managed care. But if the state plan amendment is approved before January, then the ability to bill Medicaid for family care support services may be something that is an option prior to even January. So, you know, you as provider organizations, many of the people in the Western region who are on this call don't have a history of billing Medicaid for anything. So, you know, there's a lot of things for you to consider, a lot of decisions that you will need to make. Some of you will decide to go ahead and become an agency that bills Medicaid and makes contracts with managed care organizations and functions as a provider organization in Medicaid managed care. Some of you may decide through this process that you need to work together among yourselves and with other provider organizations to perhaps build a kind of back office which can help you with some of the technical aspects of participating in managed care. Some of you may decide to merge with larger provider organizations. All of those things can be good options. Obviously, each one requires its own, you know, sort of process, and there are different pros and cons. But what you really need to be doing is putting together that team that we talked about, and it very likely will include people who are not in your agency to help you begin right now to think through some of these issues so that you can do it in an orderly and planful way. And hopefully that will help you, you know, continue to be able to do the good work that you do with families. Let's see if I can. So I'm going to look now at a few areas of readiness. And what I really want you all to do is to think about questions that you have. And I'll pause briefly after each slide for you to ask questions or clarification. And if you don't have any questions, that's fine. And we're going to talk about this again when we get together in November. So the number one thing that you have to focus on is something that, of course, you should always have been focusing on, but maybe now you want to ramp it up a bit, which is, are we providing a service that is of high quality and where there is really high consistency so that we know that when a worker goes out to meet with a family, what is that person doing? They're doing the right thing, and that, you know, it's reliable, that you know, you don't have a lot of inconsistency in practice. So are all your staff trained, and is everyone credentialed? Do you know how your staff are doing when they go out? I can't stress enough how important it is, how important supervision is, and I mean not just supervision in the office, but go out with staff. And, you know, especially new staff who obviously need a lot of support and coaching, but even experienced staff. We have a lot of data from various, you know, evaluations and other processes that have happened across the state that do suggest that there's a high degree of inconsistency in staff interactions with families, sometimes meeting the expectations that you would have as supervisors and sometimes not. So think about what you can put in place to try to support the staff to do their best. And be really clear with them about, yeah, go ahead, Yvette.
I was going to say, and also just as you answer that question, we are also interested in understanding what the barriers are to be able to go and do that. So, because we would like to offer some practical assistance, so we want to know if, if it's, if you feel you can't do it because there's barriers in place, it would be helpful for us to know that as well.
Right, that's great. Yeah, that feedback loop is really important here. And you can also, you're a great resource to one another too. Make sure that all of this is a conversation with lots of people involved, because that's how you'll really be stronger. So take a look at also what kind of feedback are you getting from stakeholders. So if you're, for example, a contract provider who works with a waiver program, how are you regularly checking in with them to find out how you're doing? And sometimes you have to really invite people to be honest, because they say fine, but you really have to push them to say, what are a couple areas that you think we could improve in? And then they'll tell you. But it can't be kind of just a casual process. It really probably has to be sitting down quarterly with your stakeholders, and that would be anybody who's paying you to do work, anybody who's referring families to you, families themselves, and perhaps your government partners who you might not interact directly with all the time, but you really want to, in that kind of idea of continuous improvement, meet with them and find out what you can do better. It doesn't mean you have to turn around the next day and change everything you do. You're going to listen to that feedback and make a plan, but really take it to heart and work on improving the quality of your work. The other thing I would say is that there are some, you're not only in a position to provide family peer support services. Some of you are already, and many of you may choose to provide skill building services. You may want to provide family support services in the adult system, and there may be some other kinds of services in this new environment that you will be qualified and potentially really skilled at providing. But be really careful, really, really careful that you don't add areas of new services that you're going to provide unless you can guarantee that the quality of that service is going to be high and that your folks are appropriately trained, and that you think of it as a learning process throughout, the whole time that you're providing that service, so that you really stay on top of the situation and make sure it's high quality. Any questions about this?
Wow, they're little jabberjaws today.
Well, so here's what I want people to do. You'll see on each of these slides a colored box at the bottom. And when we get back together in November, I'm going to ask people to report out on something, any one thing, and it doesn't have to be earth-changing. It just has to be meaningful to your organization and moving you forward. Something that you've done in the intervening 3 weeks to act on this particular area of readiness. So you may say to yourself, oof, boy, it's been busy, and I haven't been out to shadow a staff person in 8 months, and I'm going to really make an effort to make one home visit with everybody on my staff in the next 3 weeks. You might say, you know what, I've been getting funding from probation for the last 5 years, but I haven't really sat down with them and said, how are we doing and what kinds of shifts should we make to be more helpful to you? So think about what you can do, and just be on notice that we're going to ask you to report back in November. Hopefully that won't scare you all from coming, because this really is a friendly process.
So you want,
now I know,
you want them,
yes, go ahead.
You want them to ask funders, or you want them to go with their staff, or what?
Anything that they think would be helpful to learn about how they're doing and improve and move toward improving how they're doing.
Okay.
Anything. I mean, really anything. Like they may say, you know what, we suddenly realized that we have a lot of families who have domestic violence issues in their family, and we don't really feel like we know enough about that. So we're going to schedule a training with our local DV experts about how to work better with families who are involved with domestic violence. Or you might say, you know, our staff are really, I've noticed in my conversations with staff that they're sort of slipping in terms of how carefully they're thinking about when a family has made enough progress that they can be discharged. So I really want to have a conversation with our staff and put some protocols in place around how we make decisions about how long families stay involved with us. I mean, we could brainstorm. In fact, maybe when we get together, we might pick one of these areas and brainstorm some activities that folks can do. But just between now and November, I want everybody to just do one small thing that moves them forward in that domain.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay. Yeah.
Nice.
Okay, so data. Everyone's in a different place in terms of how much data they collect, but what I want you to do is make sure that you know who you're serving, what you're doing for them, you know, how often are you seeing them, and what are the kinds of, you know, activities that you're doing with families. I want you to think about how much of that work will ultimately be billable, because, for example, if you find out that one of your staff members is working 40 hours a week, but that 30 hours of the activities that they're doing are not billable, you're going to need to rethink that. If you find out, for example, that because of distance in your county, and I know a lot of you have long distances that you drive, you know, a person is working an 8-hour day and only having 2 billable hours of time, you're going to need to think about how do we deal with that differently. There's going to be some productivity issues as you move into managed care. So rather than getting kind of a grant to hire 4 staff people and do whatever you do, you're only going to get paid when you're doing something that's billable to Medicaid. So it's going to require you to get creative about how you work your schedules and how you see families. And, you know, that's a big challenge. And everyone will be learning from each other some techniques around that. But you're going to have to think about, you know, how to help your staff be more productive financially, and hopefully also keep them true to the values and practices of family support. And that's going to require some creative thinking. So you should also know what, and this doesn't, you're not going to learn this all by November, but you should be thinking about what it costs you to provide an hour of service. I sent Pam a link to a really helpful webinar that the Center for Healthcare Strategies put on around rate setting for family support. And, you know, some of it is really helpful to get you to start thinking about how you figure out how much it costs you to provide 1 hour of service. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on that now, but it's a really important exercise for you to go through, because eventually you're going to need to be able to say to a managed care organization, this is what it costs us to provide an hour of service, and they may say, well, this is the rate we're able to pay, and there'll be some kind of a negotiation, but you need to have the information that you need to be able to participate in that conversation wisely.
And do you happen to remember, I know it was a while ago when you sent me that, because obviously I've been on the road a lot, and my memory fails right.
I will resend it to you today, Pam.
Okay, thank you. And then I will send it out to the FS directors.
Yeah, and it's a webinar. You can listen to it. I would encourage you to get a group of people together, listen to it, and then think about what it might mean for you. We don't know yet what the rate's going to be for family peer support services. Some of you have been working with a waiver rate, and that might not be a bad number to use as you think about these issues, just as a place to start. But these are the kinds of things you need to think about. Like a couple of providers in your region have already been involved in some arrangements where they're actually getting paid on a fee-for-service basis. And you may want to tap into their expertise and get them to talk to you a little bit about how they improve staff productivity in that kind of way. Any other questions here? Okay. Make sure you use the data you collect. You'd be surprised how many providers, and I'm not just talking about family peer support services, even really large provider organizations collect all kinds of data, but they don't sit down and look at it. So I would encourage you to pull out the data that you have and challenge yourselves in a staff meeting to ask some questions of the data. Just look at it and make some observations. So you might look at the data and say, wow, we never serve families who have children under 5. I wonder why that is. And then you'll have some discussion, you know, about why that might be the case. And you might say to yourself, we should probably reach out to the EI people in the early intervention people in our county and just have a conversation with them about what we do and whether or not they think that might be helpful for families. Right now, some of you are thinking to yourselves, we don't really want to go out and do any outreach because we're already really busy. But as we move into managed care, that kind of outreach is going to become increasingly important. And because you'll actually get paid more for doing more work, you hopefully, you know, this is a matter of how you grow and how quickly you grow, but you will be able to add staff to provide that service. So it's going to be important for you to think about the gaps in who you're reaching and how you do that kind of outreach. But there are other kinds of questions you can ask of the data too. One that I would recommend everyone ask is, how long are we working with a particular family? Have we been serving that same family for 5 years? Because if you have to ask some questions about whether or not you're really working in an empowerment mode. And it also is not going to be consistent with how managed care operates. It keeps families on caseload forever. That's just not the way this is going to work. It doesn't mean families can't still be involved in some activities like support groups, and it doesn't mean that a family can't cycle back for another round of help from you, but endless open-ended involvement is not likely to be something that you're going to see. So everyone's going to see something different when they look at their data, and my challenge to you is, between now and when we meet, pull out your data, sit down with your staff, and make some observations, and just make one change, one plan based on what you see that you feel is consistent with the direction that we're going in. Diversify your partnerships. If the only funding stream that you have right now is 1650 funding, which is the kind of grant funding that funds many of our family support programs, you should be thinking about other possible sources of revenue. Medicaid should not be your only source of revenue in the future. So again, work within the communities, talk with one another, because right in your region, you have people who receive funding from probation, you have people who are receiving funding from foundations, from hospitals, from DSS, and from schools. Now, I don't know about in your region from schools, but in some regions from schools. So, think about other potential sources of funding, but also think about other potential sources of referrals. One of the big ones that everybody tends to miss is pediatricians. And in the future, pediatricians will be one of the types of providers who will be able to determine whether a child and family are eligible for family care support services. So you're going to want to be starting now to just let those people know what you do. Help them get familiar with the work that you do, and do that in a professional way, and maybe even let them test things out with you, like if they could just refer a couple families, and then make sure you do a really good job with those families and communicating back to those providers about what you were able to accomplish to begin to sow the seeds of those relationships that are going to be so important. Any questions here? This is the outreach I was talking about. I just sort of brainstormed a list of people that you're going to want to think about how you reach out to. How do you get in touch with families that don't get referred to you by another provider? What are some different places in your community that you can connect with families just to let them know about the service you provide? I talked a little bit about primary care, and the other one I want to highlight is future family care advocates. If this works out well, you will have the ability to grow. And I know that all of you know, I don't have to tell you, how hard it is to hire a new staff person to do this work. You're looking for that person who has lived experience, who has the right disposition and skills to do this work, who is interested in doing this kind of work, and that's not everybody just because they have a child with challenges, and who you feel would be a good part of your team. So, you're going to have to look, you know, very broadly when you look to hire new staff people, but also get a little bit smarter about some of the screening that you might do to determine whether or not that person is going to be effective. I would absolutely start with the families that you're currently working with and begin to think about, are there opportunities you can create for them to help them learn more, help you discern whether or not they might potentially be good family care advocates, and to just, you know, help them get their feet wet a little bit. Maybe they can help you co-lead a support group. Maybe you're going to have a health fair in your community and they can help staff a table. Lots of different kinds of opportunities for people to get involved. But start thinking about that farm team, to use a baseball analogy, that you may need to develop so that you have some people that you can hire when it gets to the point where that's something that's a good option for your organization. Any questions? We talked a little bit about infrastructure. This involves you really engaging with MCTAC activities. You can listen to some of the recordings of events for adults, especially look at what in the adult system they'll call them home HCBS, or home and community-based services providers on the adult side. That's not the same as our waiver. But when you look at the MCTAC website and you see offerings that are, you know, aimed at adult HCBS providers, as long as you kind of filter that information, knowing that where they're talking about adult services, you'll learn a little bit about the kind of infrastructure issues. A same set of activities will be taking place in the winter and spring with children's providers. But if you want to get a leg up on that, you can look at some of those resources that exist already in MCTAC for adults. One of the big areas that's going to be a challenge for many of you is your financial readiness. You know, managed care is, you know, known to take some time to pay. So you're going to need to be thinking about, if you want to become a provider agency, how you kind of build up some cash reserves or get a line of credit so that if it takes 3 months or 6 months for managed care to pay, you are not in a cash flow situation. You may also have some startup costs. There may be some resources for provider agencies related to some of the technology startup costs. It's a little unclear what that's going to look like. But again, it's one of those things that you need to assess. And now I'm scaring everybody because as soon as we say technology, you know, it is expensive. And this is not why you got into this line of work. But again, it's one of those things where you just kind of have to keep listening and asking questions. And it may be that your organization is small enough, it may very well be that your organization is small enough that you're going to need to work together with other small providers in your region to share some of that capacity so that you don't have to create that all on your own, which probably would be the tail wagging the dog. Those conversations are starting to happen on the adult side. Keep your ear to the ground with the adult conversation, and don't hesitate to participate in that, because when it comes to billing, it doesn't really matter what kind of provider you are. It's just a matter of developing good, cost-effective mechanisms for handling, you know, those pieces of the work that you all love so much.
And then also I just want to comment on that. I think that's very important. I think not siloing ourselves off, but really looking at the whole system, because although you may not be providing adult services, understanding and knowing what's happening in the adult world to either be able to refer, you know, parents or just have some understanding of what's going on is important. So I just wanted to underscore that.
Yeah. Yeah, no siloed thinking is going to be helpful in this new world. And the great news for you guys is you dismissed with the idea of siloed thinking a long time ago in terms of being cross-system. A lot of other providers are, trust me, struggling with that. But you guys get that because you see the world from the perspective of families who live in silos. What may be harder for family support is to really think about yourself as not a siloed provider. There's going to be lots of partners. If you're not part of networks and not part of partnerships, it's going to be really difficult. So you're going to have to go out there and, you know, participate in those conversations in a different way. Any questions here? So I know, I've worked with many family support providers over many years, and I know that you're really good at working with families, but that your boards often don't have the kinds of experts that are going to help you with some of these infrastructure questions, and you really need to think about augmenting your organization's capacity to understand and think through some of these complex contracting and billing and financial questions. That may mean that you invite different kinds of people to be a part of your board. It might mean that you create a committee that's going to help you with managed care transition, so it's a time-limited process, and you might be able to engage people in that when they're not really willing to be on your board. Obviously, you want your board to be connected to that process, but think about, are there people in your community that understand managed care? Are there people in your community that have good financial expertise that, even if it's not in the healthcare field, they'll be able to help you figure out some of those issues? Do you have somebody that can really help you with quality assurance and thinking about how you focus on making sure that you're delivering a high-quality service? This process does bring you all into the arena of a more traditional kind of provider agency, and you're going to have to think about some new things. But again, I think that the good news is you know a lot of people, and if you are brave and you start asking around, you're going to be able to find people that are willing to help you think this through. But do not try to do it by yourself, because none of us has expertise in all of these areas. So by the time we meet next time, think about, and you don't have to report out on this specifically, but think about who you might add to your team of resource people. So this really just kind of summarizes everything that we've talked about so far. Really work as a group. Make sure that you get on that CTAC and MCTAC listserv and check out the website. There's all kinds of things on there that are helpful. Ask questions and then ask them again. The one thing that I am finding myself is that I've just become completely comfortable asking what I might have previously thought were stupid questions. Because usually I find out that everybody else is asking the same or thinking the same question, and that the answer may not be clear, and that you may need to ask several people, and that the answer may change. So just keep asking. And share the answers with one another, because there is a lot of benefit to having lots of people out there gathering information. Don't just limit yourself to CTAC and MCTAC's websites, but look at the Department of Health website. There's a page for the Children's MRT. There's also a page for the DSRIP, which is, some of you are probably familiar with the performing provider systems that are forming in your region. And just, develop some sort of process where you engage with that information as it's coming out. You might also want to follow some of the conversations around health homes, because you'll be eventually interacting with health homes. Network with other local providers, learn from each other, and really share what you learn. So you guys have a great group here. You have a long tradition of working together in the Western region, and I would encourage you to really, really help each other out. And, when you find a useful resource, just hit reply all to one of Pam or Nikki's group emails and share that resource. And, even better than just sharing a link would be to share the link and say, I really found that the point they made on page 3 about something will maybe really help our organization out. There's a lot of group learning that's going to be helpful in this process. Any questions?
So, Ann, I just want to verify. So when you come in November, which is going to be November 6th, Mickey will be sending all that information out. You would like them to come back to the meeting, and under the improved quality and consistency, we're going to have a discussion about that. Are any of these other ones where you have next steps under the page for the PowerPoint? Would you like them to do anything or have anything available to discuss at the meeting as well, or just that one in particular?
No, I think it would be great if everyone looked at those five, I think it's 5 areas, and identify one thing that you can focus on. Maybe you can even do it in the next 3 weeks, but really commit to something that you're going to do. And this is going to be an ongoing process. So then you're going to do that thing and you're going to look for another one in each of those areas that you can do really to just start moving forward with this process. And I know some of you are, farther along than other people. Some of you are operating within agencies that are already thinking about some of these things. And some of you are, this is a little intimidating. So I think people really need to know that this is a process that's supportive. And if you come to the table and you say, we looked and looked and looked at this issue of infrastructure, and we truly don't know what is a good next step, we can talk about that. But see if you can identify one thing that you can do. And it may just be, I listened to one of the MCAC webinars on some topic, and I found these 3 things to be helpful. Or it might be, I went out and I talked to, my neighbor because he works for an insurance company, and I asked him to help me identify someone that would be willing to serve at a pro bono capacity to help us think through some of these issues for our agency. I would like people to look at all of those domains and see what they can think of between now and our meeting in November.
Okay. And obviously, myself, Jean, and Mickey, we're always looking for ways to be very supportive of the program's needs, and obviously because January 1st, 2017 will be here before we know it, and if the state plan is approved, it could be here quicker. So we've been having conversations asking them to let us know what they do need. So maybe with ideas and things that are coming out of this, that we can find other ways to really assist and support the programs so that they can be successful.
Great. It's really great that they have you guys as a resource. Any other thoughts or questions? I would throw out one more thing in the 5 minutes or 4 minutes that we have left here, and that is, and maybe people will raise their hands and contribute to this, or at least think about it and email us. When we come back in November to speak with you, if there is some question or some piece of information that you think would be particularly helpful, what would that be? So that we can be sure that we're at least aware of those things. Sometimes the answer is we don't know, but at least we know what's kind of burning for you in terms of questions that you would like help answering. Any thoughts on that?
I think it's Friday, Ann, and I think they're tired.
That's fine. No, it's totally fine. You've got our email addresses there. So, please feel free to let us know. Or, Pam, I know you have some issues that folks identified after you had a meeting with Heather in September. And maybe you can share those with us. And those things will help us I'm actually curious. I see a couple of people raising their hand on the webinar, and I am wondering if people are trying to talk and not being heard. So I'm not really sure. Patty, I can see your hand raised. Can you talk? Can we hear you?
Oh, yeah.
See, and I don't even see Patty coming up on the screen.
Yeah, you wouldn't. I would. Patty, if you have a question, will you chat that into the chat box for us? Because apparently somehow we're not able to hear you, which might explain why everyone's been so quiet.
and Michelle also has her hand up. So
I see Nikki does too. Yeah.
Yeah. If you guys want to if you have a question for us, if you want to just chat that, so we can respond.
Okay, and Brianna's letting me know that some of the people who have their hands raised are only on the webinar and they didn't phone in. So if you didn't phone in, then we can't hear you talking to your computer, but you could chat your questions, you know, into the chat box if you want. And it's fine because we can just continue this conversation in person too. We all have a lot of technology learning to accomplish. I've received Patty's question. Patty is saying, I heard that health homes may not pay for our services, at least early on. So that does not sound like anything I've heard before. That you may have some comments on that, but it's not really health homes paying for your services anyway.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that we have not heard that. That has kind of run contradictory to what I've heard around the managed care organization paying providers to then be able to go out and get the needed services. Let me also say that while managed care is new in our state of New York, it is not new in other states, and they actually do have peer services already in the benefit package in some of these MCOs that they're doing in other states. So I think it will not be new to them. So I have not heard that.
One of the things that may be happening here is that there are services that are available only to children who are in a health home. And that is it's not part of this webinar, but if you look at, there's an archived webinar on managed care basic concepts for family peer support services providers. It's archived on the PPAC website. You might want to listen to that because it goes through some of these issues. And, you know, again, it's one of those things where you need, I at least need to get 3 rounds of this before I really get it. But there are services that are only available to youth who meet the criteria to be involved in a health home. Family peer support services is not on that list, but that is because family peer support services will be a state plan service and available to youth in the health home, but also to youth who are not in the health home. So if you think of this as a pyramid, you know, and the higher up the pyramid you go, the higher your level of need is as a child. Family peer support services are at the kind of the bottom of the pyramid, available very broadly as a state plan services, just like clinic is now. And that as you move, as a child has a higher, if a family has a higher level of need, they can still access those bottom of the pyramid services, but they can also access some other services, kind of like in waiver, that are not available to everyone. So we can talk a little bit more about this when we get together, but I want to let everyone go because we've reached the top of the hour. And I thank you all for taking the time to join us. I look forward to, Yvette and I look forward to seeing you in November.
Thank you so much, Ann and Yvette, for pulling this all together. We really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you. You guys have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.